Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 674, for the 5th of September 2021. Richard Saunders coming to you from the continuing saga of lockdown Sydney, Australia. And we remember that, of course, other places are in lockdown. And unsurprisingly, quite a bit of today's show is devoted to COVID conspiracies, shenanigans, and whatever going on with COVID. And right at the start, let me make an observation here. The numbers of people, well, I know for the Sydney statistics at least, who are being hospitalised is growing every day, because over the past 4 days, we've had over 1,000 new cases every day. Yesterday, as I record this, yesterday was Saturday. Yesterday we had over 1,500 new cases. Now, of course, with the nature of COVID-19, many of those people will be home quarantined and maybe very ill, but they will recover at home. And after 14 days or so, they will be deemed to be over it. However, of course, there is a percentage of those people who cannot quarantine at home because they become very ill and they need hospitalization. And a percentage of those people end up in intensive care on ventilators. And of course, every day now we're hearing about people dying either in hospital or at home. Now, each day as those numbers increase, the roll-on effect is, of course, the number of people needing intensive care or hospitalization increases every day. So now there is quite a strain on the healthcare system, and I fear that's only going to get worse. So a big shout out to the nurses and carers and doctors who work in hospitals, because ambulance drivers, or AMBOs as we call them here in Australia, paramedics, what a strain they're under. And we must remember they are risking their lives. They work with infected people every day. They're risking their lives for our society. And I guess this doesn't cross the mind of the freedom marchers and the anti-vaxxers and so on. And also remember that people who need to go to hospital for lots of other reasons, heart attacks, broken legs, whatever the case may be, surgery, cancer situations, they're also feeling the pinch of this because they can't always get into the hospital now. And also things like elective surgery, non-critical surgery is being delayed. So the roll-on effect is quite profound. And all that brings us to our first report today, a letter being sent to GPs. This one happened to be sent to some GPs in Queensland, the state of Queensland. It's outrageous. It's rambling. It's borderline gibberish. It's a mishmash of sovereign citizen arguments and craziness and religion. But it's worth hearing. So at the top of the show, I will read out one of these bizarre conspiracy letters being sent here in Australia to general practitioners. Following on from that and talking about sovereign citizens, another report from our dear late reporter Shelley Stocken. And I think I'll be doing this every now and then in tribute to Shelley, because she was such an exceptional woman, and we really do miss her. A report Shelley did some years ago about freemen of the land, sovereign citizens. And it seems a movement that really started in the United States is, it's certainly infected Australia, so to speak. Following that, we hear once again from the skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet. She is looking for a replacement. Find out more later on. And to round off the show, it's back to the Trove archives and a bit of a change of pace. We're going to be looking again at the paranormal in the historical records of Australian newspapers, paranormal and research. And once again, these search criteria return all sorts of interesting results. Stay tuned at the end of the episode for more announcements from me, including an upcoming talk I'm giving. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and have a slice of leftover spinach pizza. I'm one of these people who like things like spinach and Brussels sprouts. Go figure. While I do that, I hope you enjoy The Skeptic Zone. One of the things that this whole COVID pandemic has brought to light is the number of people in our society ready to jump on the bandwagon of any conspiracy that's going out there. People who listen to crazy internet memes. If you listen to a meme, read a meme, watch internet conspiracy videos, and these are being fueled, of course, largely by the conspiracy theorists and the anti-vaxxers. Where we're seeing this in action is on the streets, a lot of the time, where people still, with the Delta variation at large in Sydney, people are still ready, spurred on by these conspiracy theories, to march in the streets not wearing masks and put themselves and others in danger. Other ways this manifests itself is people feel compelled to send letters, in this case, to general practitioners. And here's one that's come my way. This was a letter sent to a general practitioner in the state of Queensland. And according to reports, this letter has been widely circulated amongst other general practitioners, or sent to them, I should say. And this letter has also been referred to the police. Now, it's a form letter. It's simply printed out, probably downloaded from the internet. It says at the top, "To the attention of Dr." and then there's an underline, so people can write in pen or pencil or crayon, whatever doctor they want. Date. In this case, it is blank/blank/2021. So again, they can simply fill in the date. This one happens to be the 25th of last month. Cease and desist order on COVID-19 measures. And it reads, "We, the people / men and women of Australia, order you to cease and desist the use of experimental vaccines as they constitute crimes against humanity under natural law, common law, treaty law, Article 6 and 7 of the United Nations Criminal Court Statute, the Nuremberg Code, the Geneva Convention, the United Nations Convention, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the Magna Carta, and the Constitution of Australia. These crimes are being committed against innocent freeborn men, women, and children of the Australian Federation, all of whom stand under God's jurisdiction and protection. If you have evidence that none of these rights exist, you are hereby commanded to provide all and any such evidence within 72 hours of receipt of this cease and desist order. We have seen no such evidence and believe no such evidence to exist. The following actions constitute crimes against humanity, in gross contravention of every law and treaty ratified since World War II." And here is the list of what they consider to be the actions which constitute crimes. 1. All experimentation of the COVID-19 treatment on unsuspecting innocent civilians, thus constituting biowarfare on the people. 2. All PCR testing which perpetuates the lie of a deadly pandemic, thereby constituting psychological warfare on the people, if not a biowarfare. 3. All demands to mask in places including, but not limited to, private spaces, public spaces, on transportation by land, air and maritime. This constitutes a further psychological assault on the people. 4. All lockdowns which constitute false imprisonment, and a continuance of psychological warfare against the people. 5. All quarantines of healthy Australian citizens, which furthers bio and psychological warfare against the Australian people. 6. All closures of state and territorial boundaries separating families and breaking fundamental rules of freedom of movement within the Federation. If the Federation has been dissolved, you must make the people aware. For in such an instance, the federal body has no jurisdiction upon the people, and any hostile act such as those listed herein shall be considered a declaration of open war from a hostile agent against the free people of this land, and the people maintain the right to protect their lives, freedoms, liberties, and property. Why do I think this has been more or less based on something an American freeman of the land or sovereign citizen would write? 7. All closures of Australian borders, which constitutes a corrosive effort to force the unsuspecting people of the land into participating in a medical experiment, as well as functioning as another arm of psychological warfare on the people by dividing families and keeping the entire country hostage to the edicts of the World Health Organization, a demonstrably corrupt institution, and the officials of which are not elected by the Australian people. The Australian Federation is to stand as a free country, not a prison island. 8. All state of emergencies which constitute fraudulent excuses to continue this COVID war upon the people in the shape of tyranny. 9. All unlawful contact tracing of the Australian people, which constitutes a gross invasion of privacy. 10. All determinations of, quote, asymptomatic carriers, end quote, a non-scientific term designed with the only purpose of justifying the mistreatment and abuse of healthy, free-born men and women in this COVID warfare against the people. This letter serves as a lawful notice to cease and desist effective immediately. We consider these actions to be a cowardly declaration of war upon the people you have been entrusted to medically protect, and page 2, and whose interests you have been paid to serve. Failure to cease and desist will be considered an act of treason against all free-born men, women, and children of the Australian Federation. Honestly, I keep thinking this has just been mashed up from some American document. Anyway, we have not seen, nor do we believe there exists sufficient evidence to support the assertion that a deadly pandemic exists and warrants a nationwide perpetual state of emergency that suspends the lawful freedoms of the Australian people. A detailed examination of case law, federal law, and constitutional law categorically outlines the actions of our federal government and the state and territory governments as criminal. Common law states that if you, as a doctor, remain silent, failing to speak up about the unsafe nature of COVID vaccines, your position in law is that you assent to the administration of the vaccines. As such, and being directed to cease and desist, you should continue in silence or otherwise to administer said vaccines. There can be no excuse under law for your action. No indemnity can exist. You will have committed a crime which in due course will be investigated, and you may expect to be punished to the full extent of the law. The requirements and demands of the Australian law are not here to be suspended in times of crisis. They may only be changed by the people, and they have not been changed. They are here to protect the people from the tyrannical and corruptible tendencies of governments and those in office. It is during times of crisis when such laws are needed the most to protect the people. We forthwith declare that all named herein have overstepped and severely violated the boundaries of their office and failed to consider and protect the lawful interests of the Australian people in every conceivable way. We take this opportunity to remind you of the following. The one true Almighty God stands as our one and only Master. All free-born men, women, and children upon this land, and indeed the world, is a vice-regent of God, placed upon this earth by God's will alone. Government was established under the Almighty God by free-born men and women, and was entrusted to run our affairs and act in our best interest. The government serves the people under God. Thus, all named herein owe a fiduciary duty to the people of Australia and are public servants only, directly answerable to we, the free people of this land. By default and by association with this government in accordance with the rules of equity, you have 72 hours from receipt of this letter to provide us with all and any proof to a contrary assertion. Should you fail to answer this order, it is taken that your silence is an admission that no such evidence exists. Should you continue any of the actions enumerated herein, and be found guilty of treason, or of conspiracy to cause harm, loss, or injury to the people of the Australian Federation, or of breaching your fiduciary duty as a medical doctor to the Australian people, you will be stripped of your office and credentials, tried before God and a jury of the people, and punished according to the will of God and the people who stand as his vice-regent. We direct you to govern yourself accordingly. Signed, and in this case it's just a squiggle, and underneath it says, Concerned Citizen. And right at the end we have a P.O. Box address. P.O. Box 4320, Gumdale, Queensland 4154. I wonder if some sort of artificial intelligence bot wrote that, just grabbing word salad of sovereign citizens and mashing them all together. If not, a couple of things are quite plain from this letter at least, and I guess the base assertion is that COVID is a hoax. And I'm still surprised, and I'm surprised that I'm surprised, but I am still surprised that so many people in our society still consider COVID to be a hoax, that it's not real. And this again is spurred on by various conspiracy mongers out there who tell their, may I use the word sheeple? I guess I should. Tell their flock, their sheeple, that COVID is a hoax, and this is all part of the giant one world conspiracy, and you've heard it all before. That is just one example of the crazy letters being circulated in our society and probably around the world.
Hello, this is Maynard. Did you know that you could listen to the Skeptic Zone on YouTube? Yes, I know, sounds crazy, but it's true. Also, you can hear 40 logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma and funny sketches with Richard Saunders and a host of other skeptics. Just click on the YouTube links on the homepage at skepticzone.tv.
Hello, this is Shelley Stockin, and today I'm going to talk about freemen on the land.
Hey, mate, a driver's licence there?
Yeah, I did.
I'll get you to say your full name.
Corporations have names. I don't.
Well, there's a name on your licence, so what's the one on that?
That's a corporate entity.
All right, so how would you like me to refer to you?
as a polite human.
That's what I'm doing, so that's why I've asked you nicely just for your name. No, it's under the road rules, so I'm allowed to issue an
These are
infringement
public
notice.
highways, though.
They are, and that's why I'm allowed to. You're driving a motor vehicle on that highway, and you were using your mobile phone, which is an offence under the road rules.
If you do carry out this fraud, under maritime law, 1912, Hall of Tarsus will be visible under habeas corpus, and you will owe me. You will be in debt to $3 billion or 3 pots of gold.
That was taken from Channel 7's Highway Patrol program, in which police pull over a man for using his phone while driving, and the man provides a very unusual response. At least, it's an unusual response if you're unfamiliar with the Freemen on the Land movement. How can I describe the Freemen on the Land movement? Let me start by asking you a question. Have you ever wanted to be two people? One version of you could be the sensible, law-abiding one, the one that works hard, pays tax, and takes responsibility for your actions. The other version of you could be free to run naked around the countryside, thumbing your nose at convention, making your own laws and having a great time, uninhibited by the constraints of organised society. It sounds like a fantasy, but if you're a Freeman on the Land, it's real. The Freeman on the Land movement, otherwise known as FOTL or simply FOOTL, has been around for a decade or so and stems from similar pseudo-legal movements that aim to avoid paying tax or obeying the laws of a particular jurisdiction. It's not the first movement of disaffected, angry people to try and avoid the powers of the state, but it is my favourite, and it is arguably the most ridiculous. But that's my opinion. Let's take a look at what the FOOTL movement is, what Freemen believe, and how their beliefs have been applied in the English-speaking countries where the movement seeks to thrive. My first FOOTL fact: the government is a corporation. Freemen believe that, because governments undertake financial transactions and have credit ratings, they are therefore corporations. My second FOOTL fact: laws aren't laws without a contract. So, because the government is a corporation, Freemen believe that it doesn't have the power or right to govern people or make laws unless it has a contract with each person. In other words, you have to agree to a law, a tax or a fine in a contract before that law, tax or fine applies to you. So you're fine because you never made a contract with the government, right? Wrong. That brings us to my third FOOTL fact. Your birth certificate is a contract. When a person's birth is registered, that person is automatically bound to the government contractually, or so Freemen believe. A birth certificate is a document of ownership, signifying the named party's enslavement to the corporation. It looks like a nicely laid out record of your entry into the world, but it is in fact a contract that says you are now an employee of the government corporation and have agreed to abide by its laws. But don't lose hope. My fourth FOOTL fact: you can get out of your contract. Freemen propose a method for breaking the shackles of your corporate enslavement. In short, you write a letter to important people and tell them to get stuffed. The letter is known as a Notice of Understanding and Claim of Right. Its function is to declare your freedom and explain your own version of the law. There are many examples of these letters online, with variations tailored to the particular Freeman writing it. Usually the letters include a list of understandings. For example, it is my understanding that the Commonwealth of Australia is a common law jurisdiction where the people have sovereignty. Or, it is my understanding that all law hangs on loving God and loving one's neighbour as oneself. Or, it is my understanding corporations are legal fictions. These so-called understandings can sound pretty convincing if you ignore the fact that they're highly subjective assumptions with only a tenuous link to legal reality. Once the Freeman's understandings are laid out, the letter goes on to claim a series of rights based on those understandings that the Freeman is entitled to. Some of the examples that I've found online include the right to drive anywhere you want in an unregistered vehicle without a driver's licence, the right to charge hourly fees for being questioned, detained, transported or incarcerated by police or other authorities, and the right to copyright your own name and charge fees for unauthorised use. Once you've sent this letter to the Queen, the Prime Minister and the police, published it somewhere and carry it around with you, you're officially free. This brings us back to the little fantasy we had going earlier and to my fifth FOOTL fact. There are two versions of you. Congratulations, you are two separate entities. The first is your enslaved legal person, who now exists only in writing. The writing on your birth certificate, on your electricity bill and your driver's licence. The second entity is the real you, the actual flesh and blood person who eats and sleeps and listens to podcasts. The one I like to call the meat person. This is the one at liberty to roam wild and free across the wide expanse of nature and probably through a few red lights. My sixth futile fact is, your name is not your name. Now that you are two people, it's important to differentiate between your legal person and your meat person. Your legal person is usually expressed in the traditional way. Richard Saunders, for example. This is the you that exists on official documents, usually in capital letters. So, for the purpose of a podcast, Richard Saunders! Freemen distinguish their meat person from their legal person by expressing their name as first name of the family, last name. For example, Richard of the family Saunders, as opposed to Richard Saunders! My final futile fact is this. Some laws are okay. Freemen might be misguided fringe dwellers with legally interesting delusions, but they're not completely devoid of standards. Most follow what they call common law, which basically states that you can do anything you want as long as you don't cause harm or loss to anyone, and you try to be honest. So I guess driving blindfolded is okay as long as you don't hit anything. So that's a very brief summary of what Freemen on the Land movement is all about. I guess the only question left to answer is, does it work? Well, let's take a quick look at some successful Freemen on the Land cases. And we're done. There are no successful Freemen on the Land cases. The whole movement is based on outdated pseudo-legal concepts and good old-fashioned wrongness. The best a Freeman can hope for is a judge throwing out their fallacy-filled case out of frustration. In reality, many Freemen have turned a minor offence into a jail sentence simply by refusing to engage in the legal process. In my opinion, the best thing the Freemen on the Land movement has going for it is its entertainment value. If you can find the time to look up some Freemen videos on YouTube, I highly recommend it. You've been listening to Shelley of the Family Stocken.
For years and years, a sceptical fairy godmother, angel from the internet, kept a watchful eye on the world, ready to appear out of thin air in a puff of smoke to offer advice and save people from committing logical fallacies and buying, well, frankly, substandard maple syrup. But in 2021, she's decided to take some time off to watch the Australian and New Zealand Skeptics Convention in November. Fancy. Her task now is to find a fill-in sceptical fairy to cover for her. Let us take you now to that magical realm of dreams that lies beyond time and space, the home office of the Skeptical Fairy.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Skeptical Fairy Godmother Angel from the Internet.
Thank you all for applying for the job. One of you will replace me, but I need to be sure to pick the right candidate.
Yes.
Sure. Okay, sounds good.
Okay, sounds good, yes.
But how did we get here?
Shh, it's magic.
All right then, candidate number 1.
Ooh, that's me.
It says here on your application that you have studied logical fallacies by listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast.
Oh, yes, Skeptical Fairy Godmother Angel from the Internet. I never miss a show. In fact, if I get the job, I will fly to the producer and tell him about a new logical fallacy.
Oh, really? Which one is that?
The logical fallacy of the sticky situation.
The sticky situation? Does this have anything to do with maple syrup?
Yes. How did you know?
Just a wild guess. Okay then. Candidate number 2. What makes you think you are qualified to fill in for me?
Well, skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet, I'm working on your Wikipedia page and I needed extra inside information. And what better way than to borrow your wings?
But you know you'd have to give them back, right?
Yes.
Right. So, now, candidate number 3.
Yeah, sorry, what was that narrator saying about the Australian and New Zealand Skeptics Convention?
Oh, I want to watch it live. So, that's why I need a fill-in.
Really? I thought I was applying to be the Tooth Fairy. What's so special about this convention anyway?
Maynard!
Wow, what hit? Oh, hang on. How did I get here?
Magic?
Maynard, can you tell Callie about the convention?
Okay then. This year on the 20th and 21st of November, the Australian and New Zealand skeptics are pooling together their resources and holding a combined annual convention. Yoo-hoo-hee-ya! You can join in to see a great lineup of speakers from both countries and some international guests too. And they're not going to let COVID-19 spoil the party. Oh no! The show will go on via the internet regardless. That's right, you can watch it live from the four corners of the flat earth. Register your interest now at skepticon.org.au. That's www.skepticon.org.au. AU!
Wow. Ooh, sounds good.
Can I go now?
In that case, skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet, I might change my mind. I think I'll sign up for the convention.
Yeah, I think I will too.
Well, don't look at me. I don't want to miss the convention.
All right. Well, thanks for coming. Then, Maynard, are you interested in becoming a skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet for a few days?
Oh yeah, baby, you should see how much maple syrup I've got at home. I've dreamt of this day. Yeah, maple syrup. Hallelujah, hallelujah, maple syrup. Will I get to meet Maple? I love Canada. I can remember when they won the Eurovision Song Contest.
Now it's time once again to visit those online archives at trove.nla.gov.au, those digitised vaults of newspapers and magazines, clippings, journals and so on. And if you've been following this segment for some time, you know the general theme is looking up the paranormal, the supernatural, and associated topics in the archives of Australian history, as reported in various newspapers. And this week my search criteria was paranormal research. And as it turns out, that returns quite a broad spectrum of results. But let's begin this time in the year 1953, on the 29th of July, as reported in the Courier Mail from Brisbane, Queensland. Do you believe in ghosts? Joyce Sterling is left wondering. When one of your friends tells you a ghost story, you enjoy the temporary prickling of the scalp that accompanies it, then forget all about it. But when a distinguished doctor of science writes a 400-page book crammed with fascinating illustrations of psychic phenomena, you don't forget about it. On the contrary, you might possibly mull over it indefinitely. Dr. Rayner C. Johnson is a master of Queen's College University of Melbourne. He has called his book, quote, The Imprisoned Splendor, end quote. And the imprisoned splendor is that certain something within us, which some people call a soul, and whose adventurings, past, present, and future, he has spent endless thought and research in following. Don't make any mistake, this is not a collection of sensational supernatural experiences. It is a scientific and objective probe by a brilliant and sensitive mind into what is known as, quote, paranormal phenomena, end quote. It takes in telepathy, clairvoyance, poltergeist phenomena, apparitions, and the work of mediums. There is a chapter on reincarnation, which to many a questioning and confused mind will offer the greatest possible comfort. And it sifts evidence for those strange exaltations of the spirit known as, quote, mystical experiences, end quote, with reassuring thoughtfulness. It is not an easy book. In fact, Dr. Johnson himself says that if the reader finds one chapter too difficult, then he should move on to the next and come back later with a clearer mind. In one way, this is a pity, because it might discourage the casual or lazy reader. In another way, it is exciting because it is obvious that this man wants you to arrive at your conclusions, as he did, along the path of close scientific scrutiny. Apparitions. Some of the data Dr. Johnson has collected in the course of his research makes astounding reading. In one chapter on apparitions, the startling story he tells of a certain Lord Brougham, a young Englishman travelling in Sweden, is typical. In his salad days, Lord Brougham took a vow with a friend that whoever died first would come back and visit the other, so that they could settle any doubts they might have with regard to a future life. At the town of Gothenburg in Sweden, Lord Brougham took a bath at a local hotel, an odd place, one feels, in which to have a psychical experience. In a letter to a friend, Lord Brougham writes, "While lying in the warm bath, enjoying the comfort of the heat, I turned my head round, looking towards the chair on which I had deposited my clothes. On the chair sat the friend with whom I had taken the vow, looking at me calmly. How I got out of the bath I know not, but on recovering my senses, I found myself sprawled on the floor. The apparition had disappeared. So strong was the impression made upon me that I wrote down the details of my experience, together with the date, December 19. Soon after my return to Edinburgh, there arrived a letter from India announcing my friend's death. He had died on December 19. Telepathy. We all know what telepathy means, that curious ability of the mind to pick up the thoughts of another mind. You walk into a lift with a tune in your head. Someone immediately starts to whistle the same tune. Coincidence? You won't think so after you have read Dr. Johnson's chapter on telepathy, nor can you doubt for one moment the authenticity of many cases of precognition he quotes, that sudden intuition that sends one hurrying to the side of a dear one because they know there is something the matter. By the time you are well immersed in this book, you will become convinced that no paranormal experience is too fantastic to be believed, especially as your conviction is quickly supported by the author himself with such mundane things as geometrical diagrams, together with his own calm commentary. You may or may not know of the division of the body and soul known as projection, a state in which the spirit leaves the body and quite literally goes visiting. Visitations. One is inclined to envy the experiences of Miss Margery Bassett, who, during an experiment under guidance of an expert, quote, set forth on visitations to other parts of the globe, end quote. Miss Bassett says that, quote, projecting herself into space, end quote, she was, quote, deeply interested to find herself in bright sunshine over the Mediterranean, end quote. On another occasion, she, quote, visited, end quote, Tibet and had her detailed memories of the place confirmed by people who had really been there. Miss Bassett says she experienced a sense of, quote, great adventure, end quote, during these unorthodox tours. Who wouldn't? With not even a vaccination mark to spoil them. And I'll just pause there to say that's ironic, isn't it? That's interesting. Even if I look at my arm now, I have a vaccination mark from my childhood, and I don't think that spoils my arm at all. But we read on. In a more macabre vein, there are experiences of people who at times of crisis or physical accident have been aware of their spiritual self, dispassionately observing from above their broken and pain-ridden bodies. And so to the concluding chapter on reincarnation, in which Dr. Johnson touches on such popular pointers to a previous existence as the child prodigy, and that feeling of, quote, I have been here before, end quote, which most of us know so well. Endless way. And where does all this lead?
We have looked in this book at many questions,
says the writer,
and found perhaps satisfying answers to none. But even to look fearlessly is to be strangely comforted. We live in a universe more wonderful than all our dreams. That at least seems clear. To sum up, we have enough trustworthy evidence to anticipate our survival of the change called death. For myself, birth and death seem to be, respectively, the great exile and the great returning home. I expect, when the immediate shock of the change is over, to find myself in a body familiar to me, because it has always been a possession without my realizing it, in a country from which come thronging back to me welcoming echoes of my old familiarity. It will still be a world of appearance, but since one veil will then have fallen from the face of truth, I shall expect to find myself more responsive to her eternal beauty as I set out again, a pilgrim on the endless way.
Oh, and that is some book review, and that book was called again The Imprisoned Splendor. Let's look that up. And here we go, and the return brings us to goodreads.com, The Imprisoned Splendor by Raynor C. Johnson. And there's quite a lengthy overview of the book. In this book, physicist Raynor Johnson explores natural science, psychical research, and mystical experience. The book is valuable for the serious and casual reader alike, or anyone wishing to explore the mystical world of paranormal phenomena. Telepathy, clairvoyance, clairaudience, telekinesis, poltergeist phenomena, phantoms of the living and the dead, trance phenomena, automatic writing, and the evidence for the etheric body are all discussed. Johnson, the scientist, is clearly a mystic at heart, and makes for fascinating reading. No stone is left unturned, and theological dogma is cast aside. Pre-existence is discussed in depth. There is more there, and it concludes, The Imprisoned Splendor is deeply impressive, and now considered a classic of psychical research literature. Ooh, and it can be yours on Kindle for only $5.99. While over at Amazon, there is a review. Somebody has given it 5 stars. This was written in 2001. Provokes more wonder than the Discovery Channel. And the review is in all caps. So, a great book to read for insight about reality in all sides of life. And it goes on waxing lyrical. And it goes on, I recommend this book to anyone who is a curious and open-minded individual. I enjoyed the book immensely. Yes, I think you did. Now, the next return we find comes from the Canberra Times, dated the 30th of November, 1995. Scientific study, quote, proves, end quote, ESP works for some. And I'll just say we've mentioned before in the Trove archives how out of date the term ESP has become. When I was younger in the 70s and the 80s, the term was frequent, was ubiquitous. Washington, Wednesday. Some people might have a paranormal ability to visualize hidden or distant objects without actually seeing them. A CIA-commissioned study made public yesterday, as reported. The study by the American Institute for Research, a private Washington social science research firm, said, quote, statistically significant, end quote, results have been observed in laboratory experiments to test extrasensory perception, which it called, quote, remote viewing, end quote. The Central Intelligence Agency commissioned the study at the request of the Senate Appropriations Committee, keen to know whether more government research into parapsychology was warranted to give US spy agencies an extra arrow in their quiver. The findings were made public after they were cited by ABC News. David Christian, a CIA spokesman, declined to discuss examples of CIA use of so-called psychic spying, but said most of its research in the 1970s was, quote, experimental, end quote. The Defense Intelligence Agency, which coordinates military intelligence, had no comment. Not surprising. A statistics professor from the University of California, Davis, Jessica Utz, who worked on the study and specializes in evaluating parapsychological research, said the data she viewed for the CIA study had produced the most credible evidence to date that humans were capable of paranormal psychic feats. At this stage, using the standards applied to any other area of science, the case for psychic functioning has been scientifically proven, she said. And when was that again? It was 1995. So in her opinion, the case for psychic functioning was proven a very long time ago. I wonder how that worked out. And finally, we find ourselves in the year 1938. Monday, the 18th of April, from the Newcastle Sun. Friends of Spooks form a club. The Ghost Club, seen last during November 1936, is to reappear in London. In spite of its name, the club will not meet at midnight, but at the more prosaic hour of 8 p.m. Mr. Harry Price, the new chairman, told a representative of The Observer why this once most guarded of London societies is to return under its old name and with a new constitution to discuss psychic topics, listen to personal experiences of, quote, the alleged paranormal, end quote, and visit haunted houses.
The club was founded in 1862, he said, to inquire into the doing of those celebrated charlatans, the Davenport brothers, and to investigate the table-turning mania in the United States. George Cruikshank, the artist, paroled the club's activities in a small illustrated volume called A Discovery Concerning Ghosts, with a rap at rappers. Presently the club disappeared, but persons with an interest in the occult revived it at Cambridge in 1881. During its early days it was supported by such men as Stanton Moses, the medium, Lawrence Oliphant, the author, Sir William Crookes, Sir William Barrett, T. Churton Collins, and others. By November 1936, when the end came, the Ghost Club had met on nearly 500 occasions. It had much ritual of its own. The members, known as ghosts, were convinced spiritualists. At meeting after meeting, the secretary would read the roll naming all ghosts since the inception of the club, and to the names of the deceased members, the president would reply, "Passed on." Later, the brothers, still incarnate, as they were styled, would answer to their own names. No women were admitted to the club, and no proceedings were ever published. The ghost kept secret archives.
men and women.
The club, in its last years, had lost touch with modern thought, and its value had dwindled. Now it is to be revived, with both men and women admitted to membership. This will be by invitation. Only those known to be interested in psychical research and allied subjects will be eligible, and we propose to limit the number to 100. Briefly, we intend to meet over a social evening meal at intervals of 6 weeks and discuss psychic matters. Oddly enough, we are starting at the Royal Societies Club with a discussion on, quote, extrasensory perception, end quote, a craze which is sweeping America, much as table turning swept it in the days of the Davenports, when the Ghost Club was founded.
Well, there we are, some accounts of the term psychic research or paranormal research in the annals of archived Australian newspapers. And I have to wonder about that Ghost Club, whether it was more a social opportunity for a bit of fun than anything else. But you too can find ghostly things and other things, book reviews and what have you, by searching the treasure trove at trove.nla.gov.au. Type in your search criteria, and like me, you'll never know what you'll find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Now, coming up on Thursday the 9th of September, and that's West Coast USA time, so San Francisco, Los Angeles time, I will be giving a talk for the Bay Area Skeptics. And the talk is called Que Sera Sera, Is the Future Ours to See? The Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project. And this will be an update on the project, and probably one of the last times I'll get to speak about it before the official publication of the report of the project. Now, Thursday the 9th of September will be Friday here in Australia, but the best thing to do would be to go to baskeptics.org, and you can see the details right there on the front page. Thank you to all those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal at skepticzone.tv. As is the case for many other people, let me say in the entertainment industry, which broadly, I guess I put myself in that category. Lots of work has dried up, gone away, is having a quarantine from COVID. Work for entertainers is certainly being quarantined at the moment, so all my other sources of income have stopped at the moment. Looking forward to better days when we're all fully vaxxed and society can get back to something resembling normal and I can perform again, but at the moment that's not happening. So you can imagine how important your subscriptions are, your donations even, at skepticzone.tv. Next week on the Skeptic Zone, the Trove segment is going to look at paranormal and spoon. Yes, spoon. And you'll be surprised at some of the results. It's not all about a certain spoon bender. No. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.